Morning, troopers. I just had a call from a customer wanting to get a estimate on building a deck out of wood. So it got me to thinking the pros and cons of a wooden deck or composite deck with like metal handrails or vinyl handrails or anything other than wood. The pros to building a wooden deck or whatever, however you want to go about this. Wood is obviously less expensive. The structure of the deck is still going to be out of wood either way, as far as the floor joist and the 4x4, 6x6 posts in the ground, all that stuff underneath is wood. So you know it's not either all wood or all composite. So that's something to keep in mind. But the deck boards, and I'm thinking about Trex because that's all I've ever used, and I've built 10 or so composite decks, so I feel like I got a little bit of say so on, you know, the price and what's good or what's better or worse. Anyway, the deck boards are going to be a lot cheaper to build it out of wood. It's been a while since I compared the two, but I want to say that the deck boards are about 4 times as expensive for composite Trex as they are just for a regular wooden deck board. And there's 3 tiers of composite Trex. There's Enhanced, Select, and Transcend or something like that, whatever they are. But that's for the lower priced boards. As you get more expensive boards, they get more colors within one board. You get 2-tone and more grain, all of that stuff. I think all the deck boards are all the same as far as the build. So anyway, composite boards are about 4 times as much. And then when you get into the handrails, that's even more expensive. The decks I built, the handrails are usually equal to the cost or close, depending on how many handrails and all there is. But the handrails are expensive if you go with, I use AFCO Series 100 handrails. And from what I was told by my supplier, that the vinyl stuff is about the same cost. So cost is obviously a lot more on a composite deck with aluminum or vinyl handrails. A composite deck gets extremely hot. You can't walk on it anywhere probably in the US. You know, I always like to think it's hotter in the South. It's more humid in the South, but it's hot all over the daggum country in the summertime. We were building a deck, I think it was last year, and it was the dead of summer, June, July or August, something like that. And I could feel the heat radiating off of this deck. So I had to go to my trailer to get something. When I walked back up on the deck, I could really feel the big difference. So I grabbed a heat gun and I put it on that deck, and it was 148 degrees, 145, 150 degrees on those deck boards. So you cannot stand on it barefoot. It is hot. Now, as soon as the shade hits it, cools right off. Within 5 minutes, I think, because I've got a composite deck. It cools right off, but it is hot. I mean hot. The hidden fasteners in a composite deck, that's a plus too. It looks better. You don't see screw holes and everything else. I will say the gaps in between the board, right where they go across a joist, it will, pine needles and stuff get in there. That's a little frustrating. And those handrails, well, I was gonna say they scratch easy. The white gloss ones I put in, I've noticed that they scratch kind of easy, but that can be easily fixed with some white Krylon or high gloss paint. Now the negative, obviously, to wood is you've got to stain it. And if you're in anywhere where the southern sun hits it, you know, every 2 or 3 years that deck is gonna need to be stained. And there ain't nothing worse than getting out in the sun and staining a deck in the summertime, especially on those pickets. In the dead of the summer, the stain dries so fast you can't cut it in like you would a wall when you're painting it or something like that, because you will see the difference in the stain where it dried quicker than the other. So it's got to be, you got to do it a little differently. And it's hot when you stain that deck. And the whole time you're staining it, you're thinking, I got to do this again in 3 years. So then you say, well, I'll hire somebody to come stain it. Well, if I go stain somebody's deck in the summertime, I try to price it so daggum high that they don't want me to come do it, because I hate staining a deck in the summertime. Now, in the cooler months, it's not that bad, but anyway, it's going to cost at least $1,000 to stain a deck of any size in the summertime. And you know, so it doesn't take long to start those prices to start equalizing. I guess you know, don't take long. The sun is right in my eyes. It'll take, you know, in 10 or 15 years, it'll about equalize itself, which sounds like a long time, but all along the way, you would, you know, if you don't stain it, you let it go for too long, the boards start bowing up or splitting or sap. I've had decks, even after they've been dry, you know, you let them dry out for 6 months or a year, and then you stain them, there's still sap on some of these decks that wants to just keep bleeding up out of there. We've gone in and sanded it down and then stained over that, and then a month later it's done bubbled back up on there. So wood is just a bear to deal with. So you can build a wooden deck and save some money and not burn your feet, or you can build a composite deck, spend a lot of money, burn your feet when the sun's on it, but you won't have to mess with it anymore. So it's kind of, you know, what are you wanting to do? If it were me, if I had to pick one, if I couldn't build a deck out of composite with no wood exposed, I wouldn't build one at all. Not unless it was going to be on a kid's playhouse or something where I didn't care if it, you know, rotted in 10 years. But there's no way I would build a wooden deck anymore, not after having built both. I know it's expensive, I know it costs more, but I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't even build one if I couldn't do it that way. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the whole composite versus wood. And I guess I'm really saying this because, you know, it's July where I'm at, almost August 1st. It's like the very end of July. It's 7:50 in the morning, and the temperature's 78 degrees, and it'll be 90, and in August it gets even hotter. So I just hate having to think about it. I don't even like building these decks in the summertime, much less having to get out there and stain all those pickets. And even worse, if the deck's 8 foot off the ground, you got to get on a ladder, move that ladder and stain. I ain't doing it. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on that stuff.